I didn't say a word when my husband died and left me $8 million. I kept quiet until they looked me in the eye and said I was a burden. My name is Karen. I'm 64 years old, and I've lived a quiet life for most of it, not because I was shy, but because silence was my armor. My husband Richard passed away one chilly morning in February. We had been married for 41 years. He was the kind of man who spoke gently, but lived boldly, and in his final moments, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "Take care of yourself. You've given too much already." That sentence lingered. He knew. He knew how much of myself I had given not just to him, but to our family, our children, and later, his extended family, who never quite saw me as one of them. But I endured. When Richard passed, the grief was deep, but it wasn't loud. I didn't scream or sob in front of anyone. I made the arrangements. I picked the casket. I stood through the funeral without fainting. People praised my strength, but they had no idea that I wasn't strong. I was just trained to survive in silence. That night after the funeral, I sat alone in our bedroom. The house was cold, even with the heater on. My son Mark stayed in the guest room. My daughter-in-law Stephanie didn't offer a word of comfort. She was too busy scrolling through her phone. I made them dinner. I cleaned up after. No one asked how I was. Richard was a meticulous man. Years ago, after his successful sale of a logistics company, he quietly invested in properties and stocks, keeping everything in both our names. We lived comfortably, but we never showed off. And when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, he prepared everything: wills, transfers, trusts. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received confirmation I had inherited a total of $8 million across accounts and investments. Everything was legally mine. Richard made sure of it. I didn't tell anyone. Why? Because I knew the moment they knew, I would stop being a grieving widow and become a target. I didn't want to be fought over, manipulated, or worst of all, used. So I stayed silent. I lived modestly, kept driving my old Subaru, kept buying groceries with coupons, let my children believe I had only Richard's small pension. I endured the whispers from my daughter-in-law about how Mom might need to sell the house soon, or maybe we should move her into assisted living early. They thought I was weak. They thought I had nothing. Mark started visiting less. Stephanie was always busy. They only came around if I invited them and made a full dinner. My younger daughter Ellie had moved to another state and barely called. I was alone, but I wasn't desperate. Every time they left, I sat down and opened my notebook, the one where I logged every conversation, every comment, every jab they threw at me when they thought I wasn't listening. "Mom's getting slow, huh? She probably won't be able to manage the house much longer. Do you think she's sitting on any money? She should be grateful we come see her at all." I wrote it all down, not for revenge, but to keep myself anchored, to remind myself I wasn't imagining the distance, the coldness, the way they acted like they were doing me a favor just by being around. One night I made stew and invited them over. I was excited, actually found a recipe Richard had loved, added a twist of rosemary. Mark tasted it and said, "It's okay, not like Dad used to make." Stephanie didn't even finish her plate. She spent the evening on her phone and made a passive remark about how much work it is taking care of the elderly. I was right there, in the room, breathing, listening. But I smiled and endured. The grandchildren stopped calling me Grandma and started calling me Karen. Stephanie insisted it was more modern. Mark wanted me to move into a retirement condo. Their friend happened to be a real estate agent. Ellie over the phone said she was worried about my mental state and suggested I see someone about delusions of being okay alone. I kept saying I was fine, that I didn't need help. But every word they spoke chipped away at the wall I'd built. It wasn't the isolation that hurt. It was being invisible while right in front of the people I loved. Then one day Mark sat across from me in my kitchen and said the words I'll never forget. "You're starting to be a burden, Mom. Maybe it's time to downsize and let us handle things." A burden. I had cooked for them, babysat their children, cleaned their messes even in grief. A burden. That night I opened Richard's last letter to me. I hadn't touched it in months. It was shorthand written in his script. "Karen, you've spent your life giving. When I'm gone, promise me this. Don't let them make you small. You are the strongest woman I know. Show them one day if you must." I closed the letter, and I began to plan. I had endured enough. My silence had protected me. But soon it would become my power. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I began to feel something choking in my heart. An emotion I couldn't name. A cut that didn't bleed but ached every night, every weekend. I still cooked, hoping Mark and Stephanie would bring the kids over. But sometimes I waited until 5, 6 p.m., only to get a text. Sorry, Mom, something came up. The kids are tired, maybe next week, the week after, or never. The 3-bedroom house felt empty and cold. I left the lights on everywhere, not because I was afraid of ghosts, but because I feared the silence. Familiar sounds like clinking dishes, Richard's slippers, now only echoed in my memory. Each time Mark visited, his eyes no longer saw me as his mother. They scanned the place like he was appraising property. One day, I invited the whole family over for my grandchild's birthday dinner. I made flan from scratch, cooked sour fish soup, braised pork with eggs, all the dishes Richard used to love. But when I set the table, Stephanie said, "Mom, you don't have to try so hard. We don't eat such heavy food anymore." And Mark. He picked at a few pieces, then put his chopsticks down and murmured, "Why don't you just order takeout to save the trouble? At your age, you should rest. Rest. Rest from taking care of them, from being a mother, a grandmother." I smiled, but my hands trembled. I didn't know if it was from anger or old age. All I knew was something inside me was cracking. I started writing things down, every word, every expression. I opened the leather notebook Richard gave me for our silver anniversary. At first it was a diary, then it became a record of evidence. March 12th, Stephanie told me I should learn to let go of the past. The Mark asked if I had the house deed, said he'd keep it safe for me. March 18th, told me not to attend my grandchild's school birthday party because the kids are embarrassed by their old grandma. I wrote by hand every single word, not for revenge, but to remind myself I wasn't going crazy. Ellie called after months of silence. Her voice sounded sweet at first. "How's Mom doing? Are you okay?" I was so happy I teared up. But before I could say anything, she continued, "This is a bit awkward to say, but my husband lost his job. We're struggling with rent. Could you lend us $5,000? I froze. Was this why Ellie called? "I know you're not well off, but if you don't help, we might have to live in our car." Well off, don't help, I had $8 million. Yet here I was, being begged for $5,000, as if I were a poor old lady living off a pension. I said, "Let me think about it," and when I hung up, I burst into tears. Not because Ellie asked for money, but because I realized if I had nothing left, they'd vanish like they were never my flesh and blood. I increasingly felt disrespected. One day I slipped in the bathroom. It wasn't serious, just a bruise on my arm. I called Mark. "You should install handrails, Mom. Living alone is dangerous. Have you thought about moving to a service department? I know a place with discounts for seniors." I asked back, "Are you planning to sell this house?" He replied casually, "Why keep it? It's a big house for just you. It wastes electricity and water. Seems like a shame. A shame, the house Richard and I built over nearly 40 years, every brick, every door. A shame," I gave a faint smile. It was no longer gentle. It carried a hint of bitterness. Meetings. Without me, I overheard Mark and Stephanie talking when they thought I was asleep. If Mom gets frail, we could apply to be her guardians. The assets are probably worth something. Yeah, but we need to take it slow. It'll be easier when she's confused. I trembled, but I didn't walk out. I just sat in my room clutching my notebook tightly. I'm not confused. I remember every detail. The first time I said no, Mark called me after dinner. "Mom signed this paper for me so I can act as your legal representative if something happens." I looked at the power of attorney form, said nothing. I folded it, placed it on the table. "No," I said. He froze. Stephanie's eyes widened. "Mom, what's wrong with you?" I smiled, slowly standing up. "From now on, I'll take care of myself." I had endured enough. From the subtle, needle-like words to the schemes behind my back. I still hadn't confronted anyone. I still hadn't breathed a word about the $8 million. But now I was no longer the silent mother complying with every request unconditionally. I had tasted resentment, and I wouldn't let it linger any longer. I started avoiding them. I no longer invited my children and grandchildren over for dinner. No more baking, no more check-in texts. I locked the door early, turned off the lights by 8 p.m., pretending not to be home whenever they dropped by unannounced. I wanted to see, without free meals, without my doting care, would they still remember who I was? And just as I thought, their attention vanished along with the dinners. The house suddenly became a thorn in their side. A week later, Stephanie came alone. No kids, no Mark. She got straight to the point. Mom, we're thinking of moving to a bigger house. If this place is too big for you, how about letting us put it in our name? We could fix it up, rent it out, or live here depending. I sat quietly looking at her. No pleasantries, no beating around the bush, as if I were just an obstacle to be cleared for their gain. I smiled, setting my teacup down. I'll think about it. But in my heart, I already knew. They didn't need me. They only needed what I was holding. I went for a checkup alone. That month, I got a full health checkup. The doctor said my blood pressure was slightly high, my joints a bit stiff, and I needed light exercise and a balanced diet. I left the hospital and took the bus home. On the bus, I saw an old woman with trembling hands clutching a small bag of rice. I gave her my seat. She smiled kindly. Thank you, dear. When you're old, hardly anyone notices you anymore. My eyes stung, not because I pitied her, but because I too had become someone hardly anyone notices. A sarcastic remark left me speechless. One afternoon, Ellie called the first time since I refused to send her money weeks ago. Mom, we know you don't have much, but don't think we're after your money. We're worried about you living alone, feeling lonely. Not because you have anything for us to fight over, I replied softly. That's good to hear. Ellie paused for a few seconds. She sounded awkward. But I could hear something in her voice. She couldn't hide hypocrisy. Strangers were kinder. I started going out more. Joined a yoga class for seniors, went to the market early, chatted with the vegetable vendor, the bus driver. I sat in the park listening to other old ladies talk about their successful children and grandchildren. One woman, Mrs. Liu, said my daughter-in-law treats me like a maid, but when guests come over she calls me the wonderful mother-in-law. I laughed, but my heart ached. Why did it feel so familiar? We mothers, grandmothers were disrespected in the very homes we built, visiting my husband's grave and a silent promise. I returned to the cemetery after nearly 4 months. I brought a bouquet of white lilies and a packed lunch with Richard's favorite grilled chicken with chili salt. I sat by his grave, resting my hand on the cold headstone. Darling, I'm still doing okay, but sometimes I feel like I'm surplus to requirements. I told him everything, Mark, Stephanie, Ellie, even about hiding the money he left me. A gentle breeze blew. I looked up at the gray sky. I whispered, when they call me a burden, I'll show them just how heavy I can be. The dinner invitation, like a punch. That week, Stephanie texted, "Are you free Sunday, Mom? We want to take you to a new buffet restaurant downtown." I was surprised, but agreed. That evening, I dressed neatly, wore light pink lipstick, and carried the old handbag Richard had given me. As soon as we sat down, Mark said, "Do you know how much this buffet costs? Nearly $100 a head. We're treating you, so eat as much as you want, Mom." I froze. The invitation wasn't out of love. It was to emphasize the favor they were granting me. Bitter, like swallowing a raw peppercorn. The young housekeeper, the only one who asked if I was okay. I hired a part-time housekeeper 2 days a week to help with cleaning. Her name was Anne, a 24-year-old Vietnamese international student working part-time. One day Anne saw me sitting quietly staring at my wedding photo. "Do you miss him, ma'am?" I nodded, and poured tea, sat across from me, and asked a question that left me speechless. "Are you happy?" Even just a little, I couldn't answer. I had spent months enduring, resenting, and swallowing bitterness, but I never asked myself, am I still happy? I started rewriting my will again. This time, it wasn't just about dividing assets. I wrote a farewell letter. In it, I said, if my children see me as a burden, then I grant them absolute freedom from responsibility. from connection, from any financial ties. I sent a copy to my lawyer along with a video of me reading the entire thing to prevent disputes later. Not a single cent for the children who saw their mother as a losing investment. I haven't revealed anything yet. To them, I'm still the quiet mother. But deep inside, I'm no longer the same person. I've tasted enough of life's bitterness. Now I wait, for the moment they taste it too. In the end, I chose to say nothing. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted to hear clearly, to see fully, so that one day, when the truth is spoken, no one can deny it. I lived as before, but with a different mindset. I still wore my old knitted scarf to the market, still rode my bike to the park every afternoon, still replied to my children with short, polite, sufficient messages. I'm fine, thank you. No need to buy anything. I have enough. Mark thought I was getting senile when I refused to give money for roof repairs. Ellie called me cold when I declined to move in with her and her husband. Stephanie started probing through my friends. I realized when I stopped giving unconditionally, the truth began to surface. I quietly installed cameras in the house. Not to spy, but to document. I knew there'd come a time when they'd reveal their true selves thinking I wasn't around. One day, Mark stopped by to pick up some things. I pretended to be at the supermarket. The camera captured this house. Such a waste. Every room's empty. If we got it in our name, we could rent it out on Airbnb for a fortune. Stephanie stood nearby, her greed undisguised. She won't live much longer anyway. It'll all come to us eventually. They didn't know. I saw, I heard, and I saved the footage. I quietly helped strangers. I started sending anonymous scholarships to 2 struggling local students, donated bicycles to the lottery ticket-selling kid at the alley's entrance, contributed to the nursing home caring for an old friend who had a stroke. No one knew the money came from me. I didn't need recognition. I just wanted my wealth to go to the right places to the right people. Those who appreciated it, who were grateful. The birthday party, and the charade, My grandchild's birthday was held at a fancy restaurant. Ellie sent an invitation with a note dress code, elegant and sophisticated. I arrived in the purple velvet ao dye Richard once loved, simple but refined. As I walked in, Stephanie whispered to Mark, "Your mom looks like a kitchen worker who snuck out." I smiled, standing still. The party was filled with Mark's friends, successful, polished people. No one spoke to me for more than a minute. I sat quietly observing, remembering. I began testing them. I pretended to have fallen and texted Ellie, "I'm feeling a bit dizzy. Can you visit me today?" Her reply, "So sorry, Mom. I have to take the kids to dance class today." I tried Mark. "I need to check some documents, but my eyes are blurry." "Can you come by when you're free?" Mark sent an OK sticker and never showed up. I texted and the young housekeeper. Without mentioning the fall, I said I'm feeling a bit tired. "Could you come clean a little early?" 15 minutes later, Anne was at my door holding a bowl of plain porridge and ginger slices. A conversation revealed everything. Through the camera, I saw Stephanie talking to Ellie over coffee at my house. I pretended to be in the backyard. "She's holding on to this house tightly, but I heard she's getting weak. It won't be long." "Do you think she'll leave anything behind?" "I'm sure she will. She's hiding it well. But don't worry, I'm nudging Mark to apply as co-guardian. Then we'll control everything." I clenched my fists, not because of the money, but because of the shameless scheming of 2 women who once called me Mom. I printed copies of all the recordings and journal entries. I compiled a thick dossier, numbered every page. Sent 1 copy to my lawyer, another to a safe deposit box at the bank. I titled the file Evidence of Indifference. If one day I'm no longer lucid or no longer alive, the truth will still come to light. The story of Nhung, my neighbor. Nhung, the woman who once cared for Richard, visited me bringing a bag of vegetables and some homemade pastries. She said, "I'm so grateful to you and Uncle. Thanks to his introduction, I got a stable job back then. Even though we lost touch, I'll always remember your kindness." I didn't say it out loud, but in my heart, I had decided. She would receive a portion of my estate in my will. Not because of familial ties, but because of her heart. I didn't utter a single harsh word. I didn't expose anything. I didn't get angry. I just observed, silently, like someone who's weathered storms and understands the truth. Doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs to be recorded at the right moment. I was ready. Some truths are like embers smoldering beneath ashes. They seem extinguished, but with a single gust of wind, they flare up, burning away all pretense, ambition, and masks. The urgent call from Mark. One October afternoon while I was watering plants, Mark called, his voice tense. Mom, Stephanie lost her job. I'm caught up in a tax lawsuit. We're really strapped for cash. Can you help? I asked. How much do you need? If you could spare maybe 50,000, I'll pay it back gradually. I stayed silent for a few seconds, then said softly, Okay, come by tonight. I have something for you. I prepared for the final evening before the masks fell. I cleaned the house spotless, cooked a pot of chicken stew with medicinal herbs, Mark's favorite from childhood, set the old wooden table in the living room, placing a large envelope and a USB drive in the center. I wore a white ao dye, pearl hairpin, the wedding gift from Richard in 1981. They arrived and began playing the victim. Mark walked in, face strained. Stephanie followed, holding the baby, but her eyes darted around, appraising everything I owned. Mom, we're really struggling. I understand. I've prepared something. I pointed to the envelope. They lunged for it, but I raised my hand to stop them. Before you open it, I want to tell a story. They exchanged glances, then sat down reluctantly. I began recounting piece by piece the truth. After your father passed, I inherited $8 million. Yes, $8 million. And I kept quiet because I wanted to see if my children valued me, or my wallet. Stephanie's jaw dropped. Mark bowed his head, not fully believing yet. For the past 14 months, I've recorded every action, every word, every jab you've thrown, including when you called me a burden and when you planned to seek guardianship of my assets to control them. I placed the USB on the table. This contains security camera footage, audio recordings, my journal, and legal evidence. One copy is with my lawyer, another is in a bank safe. They began to lose their composure. You put cameras to spy on us, Mark snapped. No, I didn't spy. I just documented the truth. And the truth doesn't need to hide, Stephanie whispered. What? What is this? What are you going to do? I've written my will. None of you are in it anymore. I'm leaving my entire estate to charities, to Nung, the woman who cared for your father, and to those I deem worthy. Mark shouted. You're crazy. You're being conned by those people. They're not even family. I stood up, looking straight into my son's eyes. You're right. They're not family. But they never saw me as prey. You, my own flesh and blood, looked at me like a bank account. The room grew heavy. I wasn't angry, but every word I spoke pierced their hearts like a needle. I extended my hand for the last time. If you came here today, just for money, I have nothing left to give. But if one day you return to apologize, to start over, my door will be open, not because of money, but because I'm still your mother. Stephanie cried. Mark stood, kicked the chair, and stormed out. You'll regret this. The door slammed. I stood still. Not a single tear fell. The next day the neighborhood buzzed, not because Mark or Stephanie caused a scene, but because I held a small gathering inviting those I truly cherished, Mrs. La from yoga class and the housekeeper. Nung, the two students I sponsored, the owner of the little bookstore at the alley's end. I said, this is my new family, the ones who treated me with respect, whether or not they knew how much money I had. I appeared on local news. No one knew I was the $8 million widow until a reporter wrote about the quiet woman funding scholarships and caring for lonely elders. I didn't give interviews. I left only one statement: I was once called a burden. Today, I am the one who lifts others up. I didn't need to shout or retaliate. I simply let the truth speak for itself. And that truth stung to the core. But it was also light as a breeze, because I knew, when you have nothing left to lose, you have nothing left to fear. In the end, I wasn't angry, nor did I feel victorious. I only felt a strange sensation like liberation, light, but with a faint bitterness on the tip of my tongue, like chewing a wildflower, fragrant yet tinged with sorrow. The house was strangely quiet. No more hurried footsteps from Mark. No more sudden doorbells from Stephanie. No more indifferent texts from Ellie. I drank tea on the porch every morning, listened to birds chirping, read books. For the first time in years, I lived without anyone's expectations weighing on me. No one needed me to cook. No one needed to borrow anything. And strangely, I didn't feel lonely. A letter from Ellie, trembling handwriting. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Ellie sent me a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a text. Paper, ink, and tear stains smudged in the corner. Mom, I don't dare call. I know we were wrong. I know it's too late to say anything now. But if you still have even a little love left, please don't hate me. I still remember you hugging me when I was scared of thunder. I still remember the smell of water spinach soup you made when I was sick. I let material things cloud those memories. If one day you want to talk, I'm still here. Love, Ellie. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer next to Richard's and my wedding photo. I didn't reply. I wasn't angry. I just sighed, running into Mark at the supermarket, a man with his head bowed. I was picking apples when I heard Mom. I turned. It was Mark, sunken eyes, unshaven beard. How's Mom doing? Fine. Silence. Are you managing okay these days? I smiled, nodded. Mark lowered his head, mumbling, I won't ask for money anymore. I just want to say, I'm sorry, whether you forgive me or not. I'm still your son. I placed an apple in my basket. Gently, go take care of your family, son. When you truly come back for me, I'll know. I didn't hug him, but my heart pounded like the day I dropped him off at first grade. One morning, an unexpected gift arrived from the young housekeeper. Inside was a small note. Ms. Karen, isn't today your birthday? I remember you saying this was the day Uncle Richard proposed. I don't have much, just some rice cakes, tea, and a book I thought you'd like. Thank you for teaching me. Silence can be a great strength, Anne. I held the gift, looked at the sky. No clouds, no sun. Just a stretch of peace. The house I didn't sell. Despite offers of hundreds of thousands to transfer it, I kept this house. Not for memories, not out of regret, but because this is where I lived most authentically. I hurt here, found happiness here, awakened here. I started a cooking class for single housewives every Saturday, invited neighbors for tea, set up a small bookshelf by the gate for anyone to borrow books. I no longer hid myself. But I didn't show off either. I was just me. Richard, if you could see. I visited your grave on windy afternoons, brought banana cake and 2 cans of soy milk, the stuff you loved that I used to nag about, saying, you'll get fat drinking that all the time. Darling, I kept my promise. I've lived, and I haven't let anyone belittle me. I sat there, alone, but not empty. The breeze blew lightly. Leaves fell softly. I could almost hear your laugh from far away. A new life, but not entirely joyful. Some afternoons, my heart still ached when I heard kids at the alley's end calling Grandma, because I missed my grandchildren. Some Sunday mornings, I looked at the empty chair at the dining table and remembered Ellie sitting there chewing candy, talking about school. I didn't hate, but I missed. And in that longing, there was a sadness, light, but lingering. I was once a quiet wife, a patient mother, a grandmother seen as a burden. I stayed silent when abandoned, betrayed, and disrespected. But then with that very silence, I made them listen. Now I don't need $8 million to prove my worth. All I need is a peaceful morning, a warm cup of tea, and a tranquil heart. If you've ever felt overlooked or disrespected by your own family, share your story in the comments below. Who knows, your silence might one day become a powerful strength. What time is it where you are watching this final part? And where share with us so we can connect through this moment.